with the synth niche on YouTube, as a person who utilizes them as a tool and doesn't create them as a product, you can end up like a walking sandwich board for companies, which I've recently become pretty mindful of, and I do have some thoughts on it, but I want to talk more about the disconnect between the music gear, chasing the algorithm, and how you can slip more into being an educator rather than a creator of music, and what that means as a musician. I've spent a lot of time experimenting with the content side of things in relation to music, certainly over the last couple of years, but throughout my career, and having left the more traditional music path of a label that I was affiliated with, given the nature of the industry, say no more, it just made more sense to lean into the content creation side of being a musician. Friggin' patch cables everywhere. However, it's a really detrimental path in some respects, in that it's all-encompassing and it can consume you. And especially leaning into the synth niche and getting recognition for that over my own music, that, you know, it's a weird sort of thing. That said though, I wish that I'd ignored a lot of outside influences and focused on YouTube when it was more in its infancy, because I was making video content then, and I think that I would have been in a different position on here now. Because modern YouTube has its flaws for musicians, I think, which I want to get stuck into a little bit, if you don't friggin' mind. See, when I think back now, listening to all those cliches of getting yourself a label and those sort of sweeping statements that you get all the time, it sort of put me back a little bit. As a young band, when we were like detached from all that process, we were doing music, but when we were doing it for the right reasons, it was for enjoyment and for hanging out with our mates and just having a laugh and just putting things out almost recklessly and making daft videos. Not even to compliment the music, but just because it was a laugh and it was funny. And it was during that time and that mindset when an amazing A&R, John Walsh, who found bands like Ocean Colour Scene, I believe, whom I'm actually off to see very shortly, but it's just a coinky dink. That's when John approached me on behalf of a subsidiary of a major label, and it was because we were doing cool things and getting a substantial amount of plays and views on YouTube, of all things. And I don't regret that chapter of my career. I had an amazing time, but when I started working towards trying to impress Steve, who was running the label at the time, I had a mindset shift which made me just abandon a lot of the positive things that had provided the signals that led me to grab their attention in the first place, I suppose. And the biggest thing that I sort of stepped back from was creating regular content. And I don't think it's too late. It's probably a better time than ever to be creating. It's just that I think that the landscape has shifted entirely and the approach just needs to be entirely different too. And now I feel like we're in a different era, a new era of content, which is far more fast-paced and has far more emphasis on products and sales, and it's probably less genuine. Short form content is like the fast food of social media, I think, in that it's thoroughly enjoyable, but it just cannot be frigging good for us. It just can't be. And I think that that's true from the consumer and the creator perspective. And I do believe YouTube to be the fairest system for creators. I will just say that in a lot of sense, in that you get rewarded for good content and everyone benefits from it. But I think even with the best intentions, you go there with the intent to help people or entertain people, but you get addicted to the process and feeding that dopamine hit, which I think is true of any metric-based social media. And the same reason that we get caught up on Spotify numbers as musicians, but isn't exclusive to musicians. That's why everyone does it, I think. Where it does become problematic, though, for more musician-based creators is what starts as an avenue to promote music seems to inevitably build an audience disconnect from the music. I'm not the only person to experience this either. I've spoken in length with a guy called Tom Dupree, who's a great musician and a friend of mine now, I suppose, but someone who I tend to follow for his music advice. And we spoke on Zoom once about this disconnect that I'm talking about, and I could see it from the other side, from the consumer side, in that I didn't ever seek out his music. He had formed another business off the back of it, a marketing company, which was great, and a really fortunate byproduct, I suppose. But that doesn't really help form a connection over his music. It puts you in a position where you can't stop creating for the audience that you have attracted because you like the hit you get. And you are helping people, but it isn't contributing to the wider goal of a sustainable music career. I think it's fair to assume that if you could better organise and compartmentalise, it's quite tough to say, different content types, which is why I'm personally excited by the idea of a mild shift in my delivery, if you like, with what YouTube used to sort of define as hub content, and I'm going to utilise their like podcast feature, but in a way that I'm still providing similar information to usual, but in a way that's perhaps a little more natural and allows for more videos. Maybe you don't want freaking more videos, who knows? I did a previous episode of Unpatched as a podcast, and I have to say that I think it was a blinding success, even though I just completely abandoned the importance of thumbnail and title psychology at the time, though that might sound like I'm particularly focused on that, and it isn't something I'm very good at anyway, so don't worry, you haven't been Jedi mind tricked or anything into watching this. What I do know from the data, which is frigging boring, isn't it? But it's insightful for me, so bear with me, is that you as, and I'm leading up to a compliment here, it's that you, the audience of my videos, or our videos, if you like, if I want to be more inclusive, is that you excel at not being fucking useless, and you don't have the attention span of a turnip. So when I get lost in the weeds at times, trying to friggin' trick you with retention hacks, you just don't buy into it. And when I make something like this, where I'm just more honest, insightful, and downright friggin' good looking, you just seem to respond better, which is actually nice, isn't it? Because that's how you want to present yourself, and that's the type of content oh, can you hear my belly rumbling there? It doesn't solve the not caring about my music bit though, but it's not always frigging about me, and maybe I'll slowly reel you in, like that old little dance move where I used to lasso people. Also, that's maybe unfair in and of itself, because I make less due to being creatively exhausted from all the trying to friggin' trick you with retention acts. So maybe there's a bit of a shift back to this. I think people are getting sick of super fast-paced edits and fast food content, and I think maybe this style maybe will resonate. Oh no, am I rambling a little bit? Anyway, I think speaking as a musician, writer, and synth enthusiast, to get back on topic, that happens to also be on YouTube. Another issue I found is you become known as a YouTuber and not a musician almost, which I find grating. I know that it probably won't bother a lot of people, but because it's just a platform to host the creation. They could live anywhere, but YouTube is a good platform for it to live on, so that's why they live here. But then we, the creator, have a lot to answer for when it comes to those labels too, I think, because we get suckered into the algorithmic-based creation, which then would give people the impression that it's the priority. So going back to my previous point, I think that's maybe as well why the audience are probably detached from my music a little bit, because I'm not making and presenting a lot of that music anymore. I'm just putting too much priority on trying to grow this, and it's really time consuming as well once you start to act like a YouTuber a little bit, which is time when you could be creating music, but like I say, you can get creatively exhausted. It's ironic because we were chatting in a Patreon meet once, and I mentioned how I tend to lose followers as a result of the live streams, and the people in there were shocked. They were in disbelief. They couldn't believe. They said, "Aaron, I cannot believe what I'm hearing from your mouth right now." Those words. And I think that the live stream is a positive way to connect and build, because it's far more conversational from what I've personally found. And you're communicating directly and with a more engaged member of the community, or members of the community. And that has to be more healthy. Not to say that you passive consumers aren't welcome, but it just feels closer to what I know as a musician who played live and favoured playing live. It feels like engaging with an audience in some respects. It feels organic and real, more so than the more formulaic content that is heavily algorithm based. And though globally it does result in far less views perhaps, and can at times lose subscribers for the channel, it does yield a higher level of conversion with, say, people supporting the project financially. So I suppose a marketer would see it as an end of funnel part of the journey, if you like. It probably comes down to trust. That's maybe what it is. Who knows? Not my background, really. As soon as the internet gets sorted in the studio, which is a story I won't burden you with right now, it's frigging boring, isn't it? Then I will be leaning back into the streams and this podcast. I suppose, again, for Maven Fiction, and I think for those who are musicians who are looking to make content, the answer is to remember that you're the product and the music is the way to promote you and not the other way around. And I believe that's maybe something that Damien Keys says. Maybe it's a quote. I don't know Damien, I've never worked with him, but I do often like how he talks about the correlation between the artist, music, the content, and the hierarchy of those things, if you like. There's probably merit in timetabling your creative time, but that's easier said than done because you can't just switch on being creative. If nothing else, it's cathartic, though, to chat about these things, and I don't think it hurts to talk about the broader landscape of things. So that's why we're frigging here doing this right now. And it's just less planned and more... I should have planned it. If you liked this, there will be more. If you want to check out one of the other videos, maybe you want to see what all this is around me and you want to get into this and you want to... I'm just rambling now to give you a bit of time to click another video. Hope that's okay. Click it. Have you clicked it? Who frigging knows? See you later. I've got to go. Bye. Thanks. Bye. Cheers. Bye.